Welcome to the DoDCast. Today, Ricky Keeler chats with Mick Reinhard, a beat writer for the Harrisburg Senators from the Island Chronicles.
So before we get into some specifics, what was your initial thoughts on the first half? I know the first half didn't end what the Senators would want, but what was your take from it?
I think they had a few guys that progressed pretty well. Guys like Wander, Swearo, and Stevenson, but overall, we're kind of seeing what the injuries and other player movement has done for the team as we head into the second half. It'll be interesting to see what changes get made as we enter. What promotions maybe we perhaps see, and how that affects the team.
You mentioned Wander Swearo, and you look at his numbers and you wonder, hey, the Major League Club is having a problem with the bullpen. He would seem to fit right in as an answer, but he's not even on the 40. What did you see from him, and are you surprised that a guy who's been invited 2 straight years as a non-roster invite isn't on the 40-man roster?
I'm not surprised he's not on the 40-man. Let me start by saying this was part of his third season in Harrisburg, and the improvement he made from 3 years ago is shocking. Kind of always had the stuff, but he was, up and down, and no consistency whatsoever. And this year, he really seemed to tie it all together. The end of last year, he started to do that, but then this year, he started to really tie it all together. And his key was actually strike one. I realize that's kind of simplistic and the key for a lot of guys, but if he gets ahead of hitters, he's really difficult. He has a pretty devastating curveball, but it only pretty much plays off that fastball and when you're behind in the count. I'm not surprised he's not on the 40-man, only from a standpoint of, if you look at the 40-man, it's fairly packed. This season they've already made some moves to DFA guys like Martin and some other guys where to clear up some space when they've made moves like Rayburn. But otherwise, I looked at it yesterday, actually, the 40-man. There's a few guys that I could see maybe trying to pass through waivers, but otherwise, I'm not really sure what their moves are on the 40-man itself.
One of the players who will be in New Hampshire Wednesday night for the All-Star game is Jose Marmoleos Diaz, who's come back from his injury he had earlier this year and has had a good first half, but he's moved it to the outfield as opposed to first base. What do you like about him, and how has he looked as an outfielder?
He's looked okay as an outfielder. It's still a work in progress. You can tell he's a lot more comfortable on, I'll say, day games. Night games, he still struggles a little bit with the lights and kind of getting reads on the ball. But from a batting standpoint, he goes into the box with a plan and sticks with that plan. I've been really impressed with, even from last year, the little bit he was up with Harrisburg, and then this year, how consistent he's been with his at-bat. Lately, in the last 2 weeks, I'll say, he's struggled some. Mostly that's from a standpoint of Neftali Soto getting a promotion at Syracuse, so now there's no protection behind him in the order. So I think there's not a lot of protection. I think he's pressing a little bit more to be that big RBI kind of guy. And I think if he just goes up there with a plan, he'll settle in much better.
It's been sort of an injury-plagued year for Drew Ward. Was on the 7-day DL for a little bit. His average only at 228 so far this year. And I know you saw him a lot last year, at least for the last 53 games or so.
Yeah.
What do you make of Ward's improvements? What are you seeing from him?
Well, it's funny. He had a really poor start to the season, and then things started to turn around, and then he had to go on the 7-day DL for 7 to 10 days. And since then, his timing's been completely off. It's almost like that time off just completely screwed with his head in terms of seeing the ball and being in that groove that he was. Now, in the last couple days, he seemed to get that back a little bit, but now we're going to have another All-Star, another 3 days off for the All-Star break, so we'll see how that affects him. But the thing that he's very good at is getting into counts that he wants to be in. the thing that he has not claimed to do, or not, that he hasn't done well when he's done that, then is hit his pitch. He'll work a count till it's 2-1, 3-1, and then when he sees something, he'll either spit on it and say, that's not for me, or he'll foul off the pitch that maybe was the one that he wanted. And that's been the struggle to, he's very good at taking pitches, he's very good at kind of working the count, but actually doing something with that then pitch is the thing that has separated him this year.
When you look at the catching depth that the Washington Nationals have, Pedro Severino's trying to come back from injury at AAA as we record this, but Rowdy Reed has kind of been that new name that's popping up, and what have you made of him as a signal caller and his home run power in AA?
Offensively, I've been very surprised with how quickly he's adapted to AA. There was a time when they adapted to him after the first 8 months, and he has since changed that and kind of been able to recognize pitches, recognize some curveballs that are, moving out of the zone and kind of laying off those, where before he was kind of committed to swing at those. Defensively, he's still a work in progress. I know last year he really struggled. Last couple of years he really struggled with fastballs, and I think as the season wears on, the grind gets to him a little bit more. I mean, I can see that he's I'm not going to say a lazy catcher at all, but I'll say that he is. You can just tell that the grind is wearing on him a little bit as the season wears on. He's a strong arm, and he is a very good signal caller. And the thing that I've been impressed probably the most with him behind the plate is how he's taking charge of the pitching staff. When the pitching staff goes bad, he feels it. He's very quick to go out and converse with the pitcher if he sees something off, where you wouldn't necessarily think that a lot of young guys, a lot of guys in their first stint in AA are willing to go out and talk to a veteran pitcher right away when they think something's off. And so I've been impressed with that part of his game.
One of the intriguing signings the Nats made last year was signing a 29-year-old outfielder from Cuba named Yadiel Hernandez. How do you think he's handled the adjustment of that first year playing in the States?
I think he's doing okay. I think he's doing much better now than he was in April. I think a lot of factors. He hadn't played in over a year, I'm going to say, come the start of April. So you can see there was a lot of rust on him. He's not used to playing in the cold weather that we get in April. So I think the warmer the weather is done, he's done better as well. He's a guy who, he was kind of billed as an on-base machine coming out of Cuba. And you can see inklings of that. He has OPS of, I'm going to say like 340, 350. And he takes a walk. He works the strike zone very well. He knows the strike zone, at least what he's used to. And it's just a matter of him kind of tying it all together, I think, and being more comfortable. I think the transition to the United States is something that we can't discount either. I think just that culture shock of that for him has been huge. His teammates really love him. And other than that, I mean, I struggle to see how he's going to maybe make it in the majors at this point as a 29-year-old, but he definitely has some ability to hit and some ability to, again, control the strike zone and kind of be a presence in the batter's box at least.
Moving over to the pitching side, heading into the break, Harrisburg's pitchers have the third highest ERA in the league, and you mentioned some of the talent that has gone back and forth and the injuries that some of the guys have had. But what do you think has been the main reasons for why the pitching really hasn't been there this year?
They've really struggled on the starters. Initially, it was the bullpen was really struggling, save a few guys. And now it's a matter of the starters. The starters that they've had that have been successful, Jaron Long, Greg Ross in the beginning, these are all guys that have then been promoted to AAA. So what's left is John Sims, Taylor Hill coming back, Fetty no longer in the starting rotation in Harrisburg, but then promoted to Syracuse and moved back to starting rotation. But so they've been left kind of with a shambles of a starting rotation of what they once had. I think lately in the last month, their offense has really let down the pitching. The pitching has improved pretty steadily over the last month. I think they got their team ERA under 3.4 for the first time in a long time, or at least the starters. And that's a product of how well they've pitched. However, the wins and losses haven't come because they've pretty much gone into an offensive funk where they're averaging, they've scored 2 or less runs 10 of the last 13 games. So it's a real struggle for them to pitch well and score and kind of come away with a win. You look at a guy like John Sims, who's an all-star in the next couple days here, and his record is 3-6. He's pitched a 3.82 ERA and pitched pretty well at times. It's just a matter of he hasn't done any offensive support to kind of back that up.
You look at the 2 pitchers that the Senators got over from Potomac, at least for starters, Workin Estevez, who walks a lot of guys but gets the job done. And then you look at Matthew Crownover, who's done a little bit of both starting and relieving, but he comes up to hard luck loss a lot of the time. Like I know one start he went almost a complete game and didn't get the win. What are your thoughts on those 2 guys and how they've progressed the next level up?
I think Crownover, to start with him, he's actually impressed me with how he's improved pretty much each and every start. Again, he has stuff that's not going to blow you away, so he walks a very fine line of how he's pitching, and they want you to attack. And early on when first couple starts in Double A, you could tell. I'm not going to say he was afraid. That's not the right term, but he was timid to maybe go inside or maybe to attack hitters. And even with the stuff that he has, that will play, and so he needs to do that. And I think he has grown more confident in that in the last couple starts, and you see that kind of in the results. He's gotten better and better. Estevez, I was actually very surprised. Besides the walk, he's a very talented guy. I mean, the movement he gets on his pitches is pretty impressive. I know he's been up and down for most of his career in terms of, 2 good starts here, 2 bad starts there, but just in terms of what he gives you out on the mound, I've been actually surprised with compared to what I was expecting. The other thing is, I've said this before, but whoever publishes the weights and the heights for pitchers is definitely wrong on Workin Estevez. There's no way I don't know what he's listed at 180. The guy is much bigger and much solid, much more of your prototypical pitcher in terms of a bigger body, a bigger, more durable kind of body. So I can see him getting more innings onto his frame pretty easily as the season goes on.
Yeah, I'm seeing 170, so I'm going to have to agree with you. Definitely, if you think 180 is wrong, 170 is way wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not to say he's he's David Wells. It's just a matter of he's just got a big frame, and it works for pitchers a lot of times.
The big storyline around the minors this year is what's going on with Eric Fetty. You saw him as a starter both the end of last year and this year. You even saw him as a reliever for a little bit. What are your thoughts on what the Nationals are doing with him this year?
I think that the initial move to the bullpen was because of their bullpen issues up in Washington. And I think that it was also an easy way to limit his innings, like they said. Now it's a matter of where if they think that they're going to fix their bullpen other ways, or that the bullpen is solidifying itself, and let's move it back to a starter, because really that's where we see him in the long term. I think that makes sense. I worry what it did to him in the time being. I guess it was better than shutting him down from an inning standpoint, and now you have him available come September for the big club, and that's fine. And that makes a lot of sense. It's just a matter of I don't completely buy, that this was predicated on limiting his innings. I think this was an initial reaction to the bullpen issues that were in Washington at the time. But I think long term, I think that I think he'll be a quality starter in the major leagues. I think that really that depends on how his changeup develops. Obviously, a lot of guys that is the case, but he has times where he tries to he doesn't want to throw it as much, and I think that they really tried to force him to do that earlier this season. And I think you look at some of the results, and they weren't great because they were forcing him to throw that changeup. But he's got to learn to throw that more. He's got to become more confident in it. But I think he will get that, and I think he'll succeed.
Yeah, when I heard about that move, and I had watched the start he had before going to the bullpen in Trenton, where he's facing Gleyber Torres and some of these really good Yankee prospects, and arguably had one of his best performances of the year. And then you move him to the pen, and I've seen in New York guys like Phil Hughes and Jabba Chamberlain, top prospects or top young players, get moved around. It just seemed kind of odd that, yes, the Nationals want to win right now, but it's at the risk of really one of their lone top pitchers in the system right now.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. He's an athlete. He can pretty much do whatever, so I don't think there was an issue there. And mentally, I think he's fine. I just don't know how kind of screwed with him just in kind of confidence and anything else for that matter.
You guys don't have him on the team now, but one player that just was there was Francisco Rodriguez. Two-part question, Mick. What's the atmosphere when a guy as accomplished as K-Rod comes to Harrisburg, and how do you think he looked?
The attitude around him is pretty good. I guess it depends on the actual player itself. He was really good with everybody. He really kind of mentored or took under his wing for the time that he was here some of the Latin ball players, especially in the Latin relievers. Harrisburg has a few, and I think that was a big success for them. And I think for him to kind of see, kind of come back after 16 years in the majors, where you go, oh, yeah, it's not all luxurious plane rides, and he kind of remembers what it was like in that way. So from a standpoint of the players, I think it was great. The team, I didn't really see that much more excitement from fans and whatever. I mean, it was cool having him there, but I don't think that it was like, oh, we need to go buy a ticket to see him kind of thing. Like it is for some I'll say rehab start for pitchers. As far as what I saw, it looked pretty much like the same that it's been for the last 2-3 years. Low 90s fastball. The changeup looked good. Inconsistent a little bit with the curveball, inconsistent a little bit with the fastball. I talked to pitching coordinator Paul Menhard about it, and he said, think of it like he's been off since he got released from the Tigers on June 23rd. He's obviously been throwing, but not in game situations. So there's some of that at play, and also, and I wrote this the other day, that the minor league baseball is a different baseball than Major League Baseball. It's a different feel. The seams are different. It just feels different. So for K-Rod, it's a matter of that the feel wasn't quite there for him with the minor league ball. I know that Ben Hart had said that even after the first appearance, he had a little bit of abrasion on his fingers from the seams being more raised on the minor league ball than they were on the major league ball. So it's almost like it's tough to necessarily judge the feel that he had, but he looked good. He went 3 out of 4 days that he was here. He went back-to-back the last 2, and he looked the same as he did the day before. So, I mean, that was promising from that standpoint.
What would you say is the biggest storyline of the second half? Because you talked about maybe promotions coming up. I'm sure there was a guy in the Futures game yesterday, as we record this, well, Futures game was yesterday, that I'm sure Senators fans are hoping to see at some point this year.
Yeah, that would be correct. I think the hope from a lot of people is that Robles comes pretty soon. I think from a standpoint of the spark that he can provide at the top of the order and just that energy he brings, I think is at this point currently missing from the lineup. And I think everybody's kind of hoping, both fans and players, that happens again sooner rather than later. It'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to Double-A because everybody says this is the kind of the level that it's a telltale sign. Now, it doesn't mean that if he fails initially that he won't adjust and won't succeed. It's just a matter of, it'll be interesting to see how he does at that first go-round with AA.
Now, day to day, you deal with Matt LaCroix as the manager. How would you describe him as a manager?
He's great. Well, I say he's great because he's great to deal with on a day-to-day basis, but he definitely likes to work hard. These guys are out every day doing some form of infield, outfield, BP on the field, short of, weather-related. I'll give you an example. Sunday, before the All-Star break, they had a 1:30 game, and they were out on the field at 10:30 a.m. taking BP. There's not a lot of guys, I'll say, that necessarily would do that, but he knows the importance of it. He knows the importance of them working hard and kind of getting into a routine. The other thing is he's really approachable from a standpoint of media, from a standpoint of players. He pretty much always has their best interest at heart. I think that's probably the best thing that he does. He's talked many times about when he first started to manage, and not that it was necessarily all about him, but he thought about it from the standpoint of, where can I get to in my career now as a manager, as opposed to where he stands now, which is he's about getting these kids to where they need to be in their career. And I think that's a big step, and I think that's to be commendable from him. And he's just great to deal with.
Last question for you. I know I've asked you this similar question before, but what is your favorite part about covering a game in Harrisburg?
Good one. I'm going to say my favorite part is just the atmosphere. Since the renovations in 2010, the ballpark is much more in line with a ballpark that would be, say, built today. So it has a mini minor league feel to it in terms of the grandstand and the boardwalk out around the playing field. And when it gets loud, it can get loud and it can echo down into the field, and it's pretty cool. And to see the excitement, Harrisburg has a pretty rich history of baseball. Even in the last 31 years, they've been back in the Eastern League. They've won 6 titles, and so people remember that around here. It's a pretty solid fan base from a standpoint of the season ticket holders. So it's fun when it's going well and when the crowd is there. It's pretty enjoyable.
Mick, again, thanks for the time. Keep up the great work, and I'm sure we'll talk again real soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricky. I appreciate it.
We'd like to thank Mitch so much for his time today. You can follow District on Deck on Twitter at District on Deck. You can give this video a like and subscribe on YouTube. We do interviews and post games after each and every game day. Give us a like on Facebook, and of course read us on districtondeck.com.